If you enjoy watching and listening to the sermons online, please consider making a donation to this very important ministry. You can do so by donating on this website, or you can send your donations to First-Plymouth Church, 2000 D Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68502. Your support is greatly appreciated.
In the name of the one from whom all life is born. May I say how good it is to be among you. Thank you for your welcome these days. Invariably, when people learn that I am a Church of Scotland minister, I detect a level of anxiety rising in relation to length of sermon. So allow me to let you in on a Scottish realization in relation to the question, why do Scottish ministers preach for longer than other ministers? The answer in Scotland is they don't. It just seems longer. So I hope those words will reassure you. Made in the image and likeness of God. These are the first words that are spoken about us, that is, about humanity, in our scriptural inheritance. Everything else that is said, I believe, needs to be said in the light of this foundational truth, that we are made in the likeness of God. Julian of Norwich, the 14th century mystic, puts it most simply and most radically when she says we are not just made by God, we are made of God. We are not simply fashioned from afar by a distant creator. Rather, we come out of the very essence of God, or out of the very womb, as Julian says, which is why she so loves to refer to God as mother as well as father, because she sees us as coming out of the very substance of God. Now, what does it mean to say that we are made of God? In part, it is to say that the wisdom of God is deep within us, deeper than the ignorance of what we have done. It is to say that the creativity of God, something of the creativity that is at the heart of the expanding cosmos, forever seeking new form, new beginnings, something of the essence of that creativity is deep within us, deeper than any barrenness in our lives, deeper than any endings among us as nations or as a world. And above all else, it is to say, as Julian does, that what is deepest in us are the love longings of God, the yearnings for oneness, the desire for union, the passion to move in harmony again with everything that has come forth from the womb of God. So we are being invited to wake up to what is deepest in us, not to become something other than ourselves, but to become truly ourselves, to live into the fullness of the image of God deep within. Some of you may be familiar with the writings of Anthony de Mello, the Indian Jesuit priest, who the other year, long after his death, received the distinction of being blacklisted by the Vatican. It is the dream of every author, of course, to be blacklisted by the Vatican. But Anthony used to like to tell the story of the father trying to wake his son up for school in the morning, knocking at the bedroom door. And the son responds by saying, "I'm not going to get up, and I'll tell you 3 reasons why. The first is because I hate school. The second is because the children tease me. And the third is because education is boring. To which the father replies, well, you must get up, and I'll tell you 3 reasons why. The first is because it's your duty to get up. The second is because you're 45 years old. And the third is because you're the headmaster. So we need to wake up. We need to wake up to who we truly are, made of God. And when Jesus speaks of our need to be born anew, he is pointing to what is deepest in us, coming forth again in radically fresh ways. Let's focus our attention on the love longings of God that are deep within us, and ask what it would look like for those to come forth again, to lead us back into oneness with everything that has being. And as we begin to reflect on the rebirthing of the love longings of God, or the yearnings for oneness, I invite us in the silence of our hearts to name some of the brokennesses that are with us now, in our families, in our communities, and to name also some of the tragic brokennesses that are affecting us as nations, or in our relationship or lack of relationship with the earth. To name those now, and then as we reflect on the rebirthing of the love longings of God, to allow our inner attention to go to those places of brokenness, opening ourselves to be part of this great work of healing. We lived for 4 years as a family on the little island of Iona in Scotland. It is the birthplace of Christianity for Scotland from the 6th century onwards. During our time on the island, we had a border collie named Joe, which just means spark of life. But Joe, the border collie, lived to round up. And he lived especially for Pilgrimage Day on Iona, once a week, when we, with over 100 people, walked the 7-mile route, reflecting on the journey of our lives and of the world, praying for oneness. So Joe knew it was Wednesday long before I picked up the shepherd's crook to lead the pilgrimage walk. And at times he would look almost berserk with ecstasy as he rounded us up. And when I think of ecstasy, true happiness, I often think of Joe. Because true happiness, true ecstasy, relates to living in relation to our deepest instincts made of God, and above all to the love longings, the yearnings for oneness. In the afternoon on pilgrimage, we always enter into silence for a while as we approach the hermit cell, which is the ruins of the hermit cell at the heart of the island. Joe became even more intent on his work, sensing the silence. And when border collies get most intent on their work, they get closer and closer to the ground. When we arrived at the hermit cell, we would sit in a circle around the ruins, and Joe would enter the center of the cell and lie down and go to sleep. And as someone who knows about border collies said to me after they heard this story, Of course he went to sleep. He had you in a circle. His work was done. What has happened to our instinct for unity? We have been given the impression that holiness is often about separateness, separating ourselves into holiness. I believe we are being called into the holiness of wholeness, moving back into relationship with what has been torn apart, moving back into relationship with nations with whom we have severed relationship, or whom we regard as opposites. We are being invited back into relationship with the great wisdom traditions of humanity. We need one another as much as the species of the earth need one another to be well, to be whole. And what are the brokennesses within our families? We are being invited to place ourselves into the hands of the one who yearns for oneness. When we left Iona as a family, we had a difficult decision to make. Should Joe, the dog, come with us to the city, or should he remain on the island? For he had never been off the island. In the end, we decided he was even more family-related than place-related, so he came with us to the city, although there were some absurd moments when he would try to round up city buses or anything that was moving. But there came a time in the city when he was no longer able to exercise his instinct. He developed cancer. The creatures are so sensitive, and if we were to hear from one another today, we would hear many, many stories of just how sensitive the creatures are. And to my mind, there is no coincidence in the fact that our Joe developed cancer the year after our eldest son became mentally unwell. It was as if he took the pain of the family into him. And those of you who have mental illness in your families, or who have come close to mental illness, will know just how staggering it can be. And we were truly falling apart. There came a day when Joe was no longer able to climb the stairs to the city, in the city apartment. And I had to carry him up that day. And he looked so sad, this one who had lived to round up was sensing us falling apart. I realized I couldn't ask him to stay any longer. So I set a time with the vet, and I invited the entire family in for Joe's last moment. The only one who came with me, who chose to come, was our youngest son, Cameron, who was about 6. And when we put Joe on the vet's table, she explained that she would give Joe an injection. 20 seconds later, he would take a deep breath, and that would be his last breath. When Cameron heard this, he got as close as possible to look into Joe's eyes, to listen for his last breath. And when I think of presence, I often think of that moment. Cameron was totally present. And this is what practicing presence is about. To be deeply present to the glory, the beauty, the gift at the heart of the other. To be deeply attentive also to the pain, to the brokenness. Is there something more that we can offer one another in our lives, in our world, than presence? And it has a great power for transformation. After Joe took his last breath, the vet said that she would leave us for a while, and I asked Cameron if we should say a prayer of thanks for Joe and a prayer of thanks for his peaceful death. After that, we left in silence, and we were walking home together. And on the way home, Cameron said to me that he had a sore throat. And when I asked him why he thought he had a sore throat, he said, "I think it's because I'm wanting to cry." So I said, "Well, I have a sore throat as well." We walked home, and then we were greeted by the entire family, and we had a Joe wake. And we laughed, and we wept about this one whom we often regard as the most faithful member of our family. He lived for oneness, this holy instinct for unity. A great prophet of oneness of this land was Thomas Merton. He spoke of a cosmic dance into which all things are invited. He said the day before he died, tragically, in Bangkok, where he was addressing leaders of other religious traditions, especially Buddhist leaders, he said, "We don't have to discover a new unity. We have to rediscover our original unity. We are made of God. We are one." The invitation is to become what we truly are. We don't have the power to create this cosmic dance. We don't have to create it. We do, however, have to allow ourselves to be led in the dance by the great dancer, by the one who will lead us back into relationship with what has been tragically torn apart in our lives and in our world. We are being invited into the holiness of wholeness. Glory be to God, and to Christ, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be forever. Amen.